Seminole Sidelines, happy Monday. Hope you had a great weekend. Beautiful day here in Tallahassee. And it's a good time to be talking about the business of college athletics. I think we did this last March. We're going to do it again, but we have some really intriguing storylines to discuss as Yahoo and ESPN both reporting Monday morning that Florida State, Clemson, and the ACC are in settlement discussions that would end these various lawsuits, again, in multiple states, in Florida, in South Carolina, in North Carolina. It's been a lot of courtroom back and forth, legal volleying in a not so fun type of lawyer tennis match back and forth over the last 15 months, but potentially with a Florida State Board of Trustees meeting scheduled for Tuesday at noon, we are approaching some type of settlement. So briefly, I think you've all probably read the Yahoo and ESPN stories by now, but just briefly, I think this paragraph is instructive to get us going here. Clemson and Florida State in agreement. They would end their litigation in exchange for the change to the ACC's revenue distribution structure. You'll be hearing a lot about an unequal revenue sharing moving forward, as well as clarity about the grant of rights. Now, when we say clarity, that means there will eventually be a number attached to a potential exit at some point down the road. Should a Florida State, a Clemson, a North Carolina, should anybody desire to inquire and want to get out of the ACC. So there's a lot going on here. You're skeptical. I'm skeptical. I think, Jerry, skeptical. Is that fair? You want to know details?
Optimistic, but skeptical. Yeah.
I think you run optimistic most days, but skeptical is fair.
Yeah. And I want to go back to something we said at the very beginning. Former federal judge Steve Brown said it to me when I asked him about how do you cover a lawsuit like this. And he said, with caution, that trying to nail down something like this is like trying to lasso a tornado. It can change and move in a different direction at any moment. And we've seen some of that along the way. I think there's a meeting tomorrow, according to the reports. And between now and tomorrow, or during the meeting, tempers could run hot and it go in a totally different direction. I think we just saw that in Washington.
Okay, we'll stay out of the Beltway politics. We'll stay inside the capital circle politics of Florida State. I think we left one Board of Trustees meeting years ago, and a trustee was there sitting. We walked by, and I think we had a quick conversation, but immediately the words out of her mouth were, typically by the time you get to a meeting, you kind of know as a trustee how it's going to unfold.
Right.
When a meeting is scheduled, a discussion's been had, some type of consensus has been, I won't say agreed upon, but there's been communication within the confines of a sunshine law where you probably have to go one-on-one with a lot of these discussions. So yes, Florida State on its Board of Trustees site has posted Tuesday at noon, there will be a webcast, Zoom style, right? This will be a Zoom Board of Trustees meeting. It's really weird that this has popped up all of a sudden. I was just at a Board of Trustees meeting on Friday in the Florida State Student Union, which, by the way, is beautiful. You should go down there if you're an alumni and you haven't checked it out. It's great. It doesn't look anything like back in our day as students. But all of a sudden, these reports come out. You have to have 24-hour notice legally to say, hey, there's a Board of Trustees meeting coming. Now we know it is coming Tuesday at noon. So we have lots of questions. I think what I'm curious about is, Jerry, what if you could ask questions, or what's at the top of your list? What do we think we will hear? And then what would we be asking if we had the chance to ask some questions in the room?
What's the revenue distribution model look like? Yes, you can have an uneven distribution of revenue, but how uneven is it going to be? If you were to base it, I think in our minds, we probably imagine that it will be based on a formula that is 100% based upon viewership. So you have Clemson and Florida State, number one and number two in viewership. And then you go down, a ways, and there's Miami. And then you go all the way to the bottom, and there's Boston College, right?
And SMU to some extent, but yes.
Yeah. And so if you were to base it strictly on eyeballs, viewership, Florida State and Clemson would be pretty happy, right? If it was based strictly on that. But I think you'd have a hard time getting Boston College and SMU and some of those towards the bottom to agree to that, right? And that's the magic of what Jim Phillips has had to be working with is, yes, it's going to be uneven, but how uneven can it be and get the votes he needs to make it work? And I think not just in vote getting, but the deal has to work for Florida State and Clemson, but it's also got to work for the other member institutions as well. And that's a big lift. And so what I'm expecting to see, or what I'm looking to see, is how closely is the distribution to the actual viewership fractions. And I have a suspicion it won't be correlated 1-to-1. I have a suspicion that there'll be a bonus for viewership, but that it's not going to be as much as it would be if they distributed purely on eyeballs. That's my expectation going in, because you got to keep everybody happy and competitive. And I'm a little worried that that's going to be hard to do without Florida State and Clemson being willing to take a little bit lower percentage to make sure that everybody else is getting taken care of too.
It'll be interesting to see, because I think even in a down year last fall, Florida State played Notre Dame in primetime, NBC. Florida State, played Boston College in the Labor Day slot. I know that was identified early on. That was a wish. But Florida State is ratings gold for a lot of the networks, whether it's ESPN, whether it's ACC network. I'm with you. I'm very curious to see how this plays out. Clemson will benefit. I've speculated North Carolina could benefit too from the Bill Belichick factor. Right. They're paying for a big name coach that people will want to see. Yes, it's a basketball fan base, but what will the buzz be around it in North Carolina as far as them attracting those outside the fan base eyeballs, but a lot of new pieces at Florida State? People want to tune in to see Tommy Castellanos, the new offensive linemen, defensive linemen, receivers, and such. So the ratings, I'm curious to see how that is broken down. I'm curious how much detail we actually get, Jerry, tomorrow. Is it possible that we get the broad points? We get enough for Board of Trustee members to say, we like what we hear. We're in favor of voting one way or the other. But maybe by Tuesday afternoon, say 1 o'clock, 1:30, we don't have enough to, on the outside, have a good feel for it. But maybe some of those trustee members feel like it lines up with what they wanted after this process of 15 months of the lawsuit. Before that, there were Board of Trustee meetings where they were discussing, just the inability to potentially compete when you're down 30 million or even more from a TV contract standpoint. What do you think we'll be left with as far as divide of those details, maybe?
Yeah. Well, I would think that a lot of those details have been worked out ahead of time to the point that that Peter Collins feels comfortable that what he's presenting to his board tomorrow is acceptable. I mean, if they weren't close, I don't think he would necessarily bother sharing it with the board. Do you?
I'm with you. I think he's among the chief negotiators, if we're talking about President McCullough, Peter Collins, Michael Alford,
Right.
probably similar on the Clemson side too. It's probably President, AD, Board of Trustee type chair. Yes.
So I would think they have a duty and a responsibility to the board, fiduciary responsibility, even if it's a bad offer, to put it in front of the board. But I would think that we'll see. I don't want to think, I want to observe.
So I guess something I've hit on that I think is important is a lot of people will just say, I wanted out of the ACC.
Right.
Or I want it to be immediate. And I think this is the natural foundation of a settlement. You're not going to get what you want short term. Short term, Florida State's going to see more money. Clemson's going to see more money, likely. We hope, right? But if you are purely in this as a Florida State fan saying, Jerry, Bob, guys, tell me, when do we get out? What's the roadmap look like? I think you have to look at it more 5 or 6 years down the road. That's a student athlete's career plus some, really. So that is kind of long term. But I think when you were looking at it, the Grant rights being up in 2036, and now it could be, hey, the penalty is reduced in 2030 or 2031, when the landscape can dramatically change, when the TV contracts can be up in the Big Ten and the SEC, and things could just be very, very wild for everybody, let alone Florida State and Clemson. I think if you look that far out and you're willing to see how Florida State can compete in a newer environment in the ACC, is it possible you could be happy as a fan in that type of environment?
I think the people that want out of the ACC, I think most of them are going to be a hard sell. They want out, period. I mean, I've talked to a lot of them, and I think they're just going to be a tough sell. But I do think others, that are more moderate in their position, it'll depend a lot on two things. One is, how close does this new agreement get us to what Florida gets? I mean, as long as it gets us pretty close, within 10 million, say, instead of being 30 million off or 10 million off. I think Florida State can win. We always have, with a shorter stick. We don't need a stick exactly the same length as Florida's to beat them. We've proven that year in and year out. It'd be nice, but I think if this contract got us close, and with the success initiative, which is very unique too, that I think the moderate Florida State person would be, yeah, I can see this. This is a good thing. That's one thing. The second thing I think that can move people from their position is if the actual buyout number is known. What's the buyout going to be? We know exactly what it's going to cost us to get out and when. If those numbers are anything short of 2036, it would, I think, help move some people. If it was 2030, 2030 is not too far away. You go lease a car right now, and that's about when your payment's going to be.
That's right.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so I think those two things, once that becomes known, how much the money is and what the term of the buyout is, I think people they may move their position a little bit. I got a shadow on me, don't I?
No, you got the light. This is good light on you. Hey, one thing I wanted to hit on is, I think Jim Phillips was dealt a hand when he arrived as commissioner. You know, he's dealt the hand from John Swofford. It wasn't a great hand. He was trying to play it out. I think Florida State, everybody current from Michael Alford, Peter Collins, Richard McCullough, guys who are relatively new, again, inside of 5 years, they were dealt a hand that was, again, signed deal by the Board of Trustees, agreed upon by Dr. Eric Barron and then President Thrasher. So they were dealt a hand. They're trying to play it out. I think let's maybe discuss a little bit of Florida State administration, again, Alford, McCullough, Collins, being assertive through this pushing for success initiatives,
Right.
then pushing forward with the lawsuit. I think Clemson was a good wingman, maybe a little bit late in joining in as a wingman, in my view, but having Florida State and Clemson fighting together to some regard, I think that's been helpful.
Yeah.
The synergy, we've talked about this in the past, Jerry, the synergy of the administration working together with a common goal. How have you kind of viewed that toward getting to this point of Tuesday's meeting?
Essential. I mean, it takes a backbone to do what Florida State's admin has done. I mean, to step out there on their own before Clemson and say, you know, we've asked you all for a success initiative and you declined us. We've asked you all for an uneven distribution of revenue based upon viewership, and you denied us. So it leaves us no other choice but to go the legal route and to take that course. You know, I was in administration a long time, and when you have to have alignment from the president to the AD, you know, from the Board of Trustees, really, all the way to the AD. They've got to be in alignment that they understand the why we need to do this. And I think Michael Alford was very strong in, you know, the data he brought before the board, you know, showing what the disparity was going to be. I don't think he gets in front of the Board of Trustees unless the president agreed with him. Right. And I think he and the president speak a lot with Peter Collins. I mean, those guys, they've met. You know, they spend a good deal of time together, and they trust one another, and that's so important. I've been in the administration in years where we had that, and then in years where we lacked that alignment. And it's really difficult to get anything done when you don't have the trust and faith in each other that tough decisions require. And so I give them credit, I mean, for sure. And so, you know, we've seen what we've been able to see from the outside, but I'm certain there's been a lot of long meetings and discussions amongst each other and with other university administration, you know, to get to this point. I mean, I'm sure there's been a lot of lobbying trying to get, you know, and I'm talking about McCullough's level and Peter Collins's level. You know, Alford's been talking to other ADs, but it doesn't happen unless you have that chairman involved and that president involved as well, talking to their colleagues at the other schools. And with Jim Phillips, I mean, if this thing gets done, this could change people's view of Jim Phillips, because this isn't easy, you know, what he's been faced with. So tomorrow will be a big day, and I don't want to, you know, I don't want to go into tomorrow morning expecting a pony and getting underwear. So
that happens, though.
It does. More Christmases than not. In fact, every one. I've never gotten a pony.
I want to hit on the long-term questions, but I think one of the things that gets me let's say immediate and then 5 years down the road, is retaining head coaches, retaining assistant coaches. And I don't have the ages in front of me of all of Florida State's coaches, but we know Mike Norvell is young, 43, give or take. A lot of Florida State's coaches in Olympic sports are in their 50s, in the prime of their coaching career. And I think each day and maybe even each year they evaluate, are they happy with Florida State? Are they getting what they need to compete? I'm thinking about Link Jarrett and Lonnie Alameda and Trey Jones and Brian Penske. And I just keep thinking, you got to retain these great coaches who make Florida State Florida State. Could this settlement, if the money backs it up, Jerry, could it be that you say as a coach, I'm happy that the president and the board of trustees and the AD went to bat for us as coaches, for us as athletes, for our programs to compete for ACC titles, but to go after the best athletes, maybe win national titles?
Yeah, I think it could send a strong message to everybody, and fans included. You know, I mean, I know as a fundraiser, we were always in the business of asking people to help. And well, I mean, I think most donors, when you approach them about a gift, they want to know, you know, what have you done with the money I've given you in the past? Have you been good stewards of it? And why are you coming to me? I mean, why can't you generate the revenue you need from other means? And so even as a fan, this makes me feel like Florida State did everything they could do, you know? And as a coach, when you go before the athletic director and you get your budget, and it's not as much as the people that you're going to compete against. I mean, it makes you feel good, I think, as a coach to believe that the athletic department has given me every bit they can give me, and that they've done everything they can do. We're asking those players to give everything. And I think the coaches want to know that the AD has their back and is working as hard as their players are. And so this is, it's important. Now, look, who knows what will happen tomorrow? You know, I mean, but listen, the effort's getting put in. And obviously, that's what we're, you know, I don't want to take any victory laps at this point, but even if this doesn't go the way everybody would hope it goes, you know, it's another step to getting to that place, you know. So we shall see.
So I think we've hit on the short term, the medium term. I'm not sure what the long-term question is, other than I think people want to know, can Florida State compete within the ACC in football for a 12-team playoff? And who knows, the 14-team playoff will be here before we know it. It feels like Florida State, through scheduling, through Florida, long-term contract, right? Through Alabama, coming up home and home, Georgia, home and home. We'll see what this Notre Dame component looks like. I mean, Florida State's played Notre Dame a bunch these last, since 2014. It seems like the last 11, 12 years they've played with a good amount of frequency. I think people want to know, is Florida State going to be viewed as respectable if it has a good record, if it has good results? Is it going to be in that playoff? I think the answer is yes. What do you think?
Oh, yeah, I think yes. If we're competing in the ACC to make the playoffs, we have no excuse not to, you know, be there, as long as the money's good. I mean, within the conference, we'll be playing on a pretty level playing field within the conference. And, you know, I like Florida State athletes against anybody. And so we should be able to recruit at a high enough level to be a contender for the playoffs every year. I think if you look a little bit longer than that, you ask yourself, how are we going to do once we get in the playoff? Will we be competitive with the SEC and Big Ten teams that, frankly, right now are dominating it, largely because of, I think they have a big revenue advantage. So, yeah, I think getting into the playoffs is kind of a no-brainer. And then over the next 4 years, we're going to have regular season games home and away against Alabama, home and away against Georgia, and we'll have Notre Dame on the schedule, plus Florida and Miami. That there's plenty of opportunity to prove yourself, not even counting Clemson. So it's going to be schedules that earn respect if you can win those games.
Yeah, it feels like those schedules kind of went back, I think, pre-COVID when David Coburn, locked in. I think LSU was obviously the New Orleans and Orlando, but he looked at Georgia and Alabama. We were concerned, what if the SEC goes toward what was a 9-game model? What would happen with some of these games?
Yeah.
It looks like short term, this is going to happen. That these are great games for Florida State. You'd like to see Florida State win against Alabama. You'd like to see Florida State at least be competitive if it's a close loss. But I think how the Seminoles played against LSU, yes, with Jordan Travis and some really deep rosters, I'm very, very much looking forward to how Florida State matches up with an Alabama, matches up with Georgia, obviously Florida, Miami, and Clemson. So the full schedule is something to look forward to. Jerry, let's take a quick break. We'll kind of regroup here and kind of wrap this up, give you some closing thoughts on what's been going on today and what's going to transpire tomorrow with the Board of Trustees meeting.
Hey Seminole fans, Alumni Hall is your ultimate FSU shopping experience and has moved to a new location off Timberlane Road in Tallahassee. Shop FSU gear from Nike, Champion, New Era, Yeti, and more. Alumni Hall has Seminole gear for the entire family, plus accessories and gifts. Spend $150 and you'll earn $10 off your next purchase with their Hall Pass rewards. Stop by their new location on Timberlane Road near REI or shop anytime online at alumnihall.com. Alumni Hall, where Seminole fans shop. Finding an experienced lawyer you can trust is crucial. With over 50 years of combined litigation experience, the attorneys at Mowry Law Firm are dedicated to providing our clients with exceptional legal services, focusing on car and trucking accidents, premises liability, and wrongful death. Call 904-824-7799, MowryLaw.com.
Seminole Sidelines back with you. Hope you're having a good Monday start to your week. Again, we'll have a show Tuesday, 3 p.m. I'm sure there's going to be a lot to talk about as we kind of unfold what happened with the Board of Trustees meeting. Again, if you're catching up, that's a noon Zoom meeting with the Board of Trustees. So we'll be monitoring that. We've been reaching out to sources. We've been trying to get interviews lined up. We'll see who wants to talk and who wants to say what. This feels like a really significant moment, big picture in Florida State history. I don't want to try to be in the moment and rank it or put it somewhere, but this feels like a moment for the next year, 5 years, maybe even out into the future as far as what the Board of Trustees hear and then how they vote, how they decide. Hopefully something will be decided Tuesday. Again, you don't schedule these kind of meetings unless you've heard something at a very high level and then trickled it down through the various trustees. So Jerry, I think this is a big day today, a bigger one tomorrow.
It feels like it to me. I mean, it's you want to get it excited about it, and so I think it was important we did this call today. I mean, tomorrow's the real important news day, but I think it's good to give people a heads up and an alert, because it does feel like it's something significant is coming.
Yeah, we've been kind of chatting this up on the Osceola Village. If you're a subscriber and you've been commenting there, asking questions, we appreciate you doing that. We'll try to address it, answer the questions as best we can right now. And of course, we'll have a live thread going tomorrow with kind of the play-by-play. If you're not able to watch the Board of Trustees live at noon, we'll have a live thread. We'll be discussing what happens and who's asking what kind of numbers might be thrown out there. And then we'll have a full story wrapping it up, a full Seminole Sidelines at 3 p.m., kind of breaking down what we heard.
And Bob, let me just conclude by saying, as I said earlier, that number could be anywhere. It could be eyewash, or it could be a very significant number, anywhere in between. And so, let's all just go in with our eyes open and not get too far ahead of our skis.
Yeah, I think, going back to some of these Amelia Island meetings that you and I and some of the other guys have attended, Michael Offer has talked about partial bridges with like the success initiatives and such. I'm curious, how partial of a bridge is this? How far out does it extend? We all know what the financial divide is, but is it extensive enough so that you, the fan watching and going to games, can impact the ratings if you're watching at home? You can impact with your donations, of course. And if the athletic teams find excellence on the field, that is worth more money, in part because of the investment, again, that fans have put into the programs. So I think we have a lot of questions, a lot of curiosity. I've always said it's good to be curious. We're in a very curious day today, Monday, and then a curious one tomorrow. Jerry, I think that's where I'm going to leave it. Do you have any parting thoughts here on Seminole Sidelines?
Have a good night, y'all. Sleep well. Tomorrow should be a busy day.
All right. We'll see you soon on the Osceola.com, FloridaState.rivals.com. We thank you for watching. We thank you for listening. If you're checking later on Apple or Spotify, you know where to find us on the Osceola.com. We'll be talking tomorrow on the Osceola YouTube right about 3 o'clock. We'll be back here. For Jerry Cutts, the Osceola publisher, I'm Bob Ferranti. Thanks for watching. We'll talk to you soon.